All right, so the next section of the notes, the key concept is that Darwin proposed natural selection as a mechanism for evolution. We're going to talk a lot about natural selection because that is one of his big topics. But in this case, there were about 4 principles that he believed played a big part in natural selection. So several key insights led to Darwin's idea for natural selection. He first noticed that a lot of variation was happening in domesticated plants and animals. Now, when we say that, we are talking domesticated animals as in the dogs you have at home or cats or whatever animal you have is considered domesticated. Artificial selection is the process by which humans select traits through breeding. This is why a lot of animals have kind of been turned into hybrids. For instance, the golden retriever. Okay, a lot of animals love a golden retriever, but the issue is that they shed a lot. And if you're allergic to dogs, that's not going to be good for you. So people started breeding them with poodles because poodles are hypoallergenic and they do not shed, which is where we have the animal now, the golden doodle. Okay, it's a golden retriever and a poodle that have been bred together, and that has been artificially selected. We kind of have picked those 2 dogs based on the traits that we want. So it is more beneficial for us or whoever needs a dog that is allergic to dogs in the first place. Okay. Natural selection is a mechanism by which individuals that have inherited beneficial adaptations produce more offspring on average than others do. Okay, and we're going to talk about the peppered moths here. I know I talked about it in our last set of notes, but we do have an activity with them later in the week. It kind of talks about the Industrial Revolution as part of that. Moths, peppered moths, kind of started out as a light gray color. The Industrial Revolution happened. I'm sure you've heard about that in your social studies classes. And kind of this black soot covered trees and buildings and everything else. Well, if you think of a light gray moth that is going to be on a black background, it's going to be easily caught and it's going to be eventually killed off. So these peppered moths started breeding to where they were picking moths that had darker colors in them. And eventually over time, the moth turned darker in color and it allowed them to survive. So that would be an example in which they have inherited beneficial adaptations to help them survive. And those offspring have produced more those parents have produced more offspring on average than the light gray individual to start with. Heritability is the ability for a trait to be passed down. If you think about the word inherited, heritability is kind of in there as well. You can kind of see those 2 words are very similar. There's a struggle for survival due to overpopulation and limited resources. If you think about it this way, say we have 20 people in our class, okay, and I order 6 pizzas. Well, what's going to happen if we join classes with another teacher in the building and now we have 40 kids in here and we have limited resources? Well, there's going to be a struggle for survival in that situation because we're going to run out of food before everybody gets some. So that is what we mean by struggle for survival. If you don't have enough food, shelter, and stuff like that, species cannot survive. And then Darwin proposed that adaptations arose over many generations. So it's not something that's going to happen right away. Okay, and adaptation takes time because the species kind of evolves based on its environment and adapts to that environment to better give itself a chance to live. Okay, natural selection explains how evolution can occur. There are 4 main principles. Variation, you hear the word variety in there. That would be color is a variation, body size, and different characteristics like that. Overproduction. We kind of just talked about that. If you have way too many individuals in a species, there's going to be a struggle for survival. Adaptation is how they evolve to better suit themselves for their environment. And then there's a word, or a term called descent with modification. Okay, and it is passing down of traits from parent to offspring, but the traits are modified a little bit, meaning that they are kind of tweaked. They are being adapted to their environment. Okay. Fitness is the measure of survival ability and the ability to produce more offspring as well. Natural selection acts on existing variation it cannot just come out of nowhere. Okay, natural selection has to act on something that's already in place. And it can only act on traits that already exist. Structures take on new functions in addition to their original function. Okay, so for instance, the panda, if you look at this picture, has 5 digits. In other words, ours would be fingers. They call theirs digits. That helps them eat and helps them hold on to that bamboo. Okay, so we're going to talk about later in the week different types of structures within organisms, but hopefully this set of notes made sense. I know this is another quick set, but I think these terms and this topic's pretty easy to understand for a lot of people. So if you have any questions, of course, let me know. Thanks.